Like the absolute nerd that I am, I was perusing the Library of Congress's website, and I came across a very interesting article about a photograph that was taken during the Civil War.
A forgotten photo album discovered in a dusty attic has just revealed a picture so shocking it could rewrite American history.
When they saw these photos, it shocked the nation. The slaughter was just terrible.
This isn't just any old Civil War image. It's a full-color photograph from 1865, a time when such technology was utterly impossible. This photo shows a secret that powerful people may have wanted to bury forever. If this truth had been exposed in the past, it could have changed everything we know about the end of the Civil War and Lincoln's assassination. By watching this investigation, you will see undeniable proof of a hidden figure standing next to Lincoln and Grant. A man history erased. You will learn about a secret presidential network and a chilling warning stitched into a uniform that predicted the president's fate. So how did this photo exist 50 years before color technology? And who is the mysterious man in the middle? And why was his existence so dangerous that every record of him had to be destroyed? The answers will change your understanding of the past.
No matter how well we know Civil War photographs, there are still things to be discovered, there are still things to be researched.
Claire Donovan never thought a simple day of cleaning would lead her into the heart of one of America's deepest mysteries. On a warm afternoon, she climbed into the attic of her family's old home, hoping to sort through dusty boxes and maybe rescue a few antiques. Instead, her hands fell on a leather trunk that looked like it had survived a century of silence. The straps were cracked, the brass latch barely holding, and the wood smelled of heat and time. She opened it. Tucked beneath the pile was a photo album bound in worn leather, its spine split, its edges curling like autumn leaves left too long in the sun. Most of the photographs inside were what you would imagine from the late 1800s: formal portraits, stiff bodies frozen in time, pale eyes staring out without warmth. Yet near the back of the album, one picture broke every rule of history. What stared back at her was impossible. The face was instantly recognizable: Abraham Lincoln, standing in his black frock coat, his tall hat tilted slightly against the light. Beside him sat an empty wooden chair, placed as though waiting for someone who never came. Around him stood Union officers, swords at their sides, their uniforms catching the sun. At first, Claire thought it was only another Civil War photograph until the color hit her. This was no hand-tinted imitation. It was full, natural color: deep blue coats of the Union Army, the dusty brown of worn boots, the subtle light caught in the folds of Lincoln's suit. It looked like a modern picture, not something from 1865. Color photography had not been invented until decades later, and certainly not during the final days of the Civil War. She brought the photograph to Professor George Kramer, a Civil War photography expert who had once lectured at her university. He first laid eyes on it, then whispered, almost pale, "It's not fake." It was proof of something that should never have existed, hidden for over a century. But if the color wasn't the strangest thing in that picture, what was? Within days, Professor George Kramer arranged for it to be examined at the New York Historical Society, where the most advanced equipment could separate truth from forgery. What the experts found only deepened the mystery. Under high resolution, the pigments in the picture revealed themselves not as paintbrushed after development, but as color infused directly into the print. Specialists traced the material back to organic sources, with compounds from beetroot and indigo blended into the emulsion. These were natural dyes known in the 19th century, but no record showed them being used in photography. It was like stumbling on Kodachrome decades before it should exist, While the scientists debated chemistry and composition, Claire's attention drifted away from the colors and toward something else in the frame. Her eyes fixed on a figure standing between Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant. At first he seemed unremarkable, almost hidden in plain sight. Unlike the generals, he wore no insignia to show rank, no badges of honor, and no polished saber. His uniform looked ordinary, stripped of markings, and his expression carried a calm intensity that set him apart. The officers around him stood stiff, locked in ritual, but this man appeared grounded in another purpose, as if he was not there for ceremony, but for something more secret. Claire knew she had seen his face before. This was her great-great-grandfather, William Donovan. Kramer's brow furrowed as he muttered that Donovan's name did not appear in Civil War officer records or the rosters of known aides. For historians, this should have been the end of the trail. Yet Claire refused to stop there. She opened her computer and dug into service archives. Within minutes, she found the name, William Donovan, medic, 104th New York Infantry Regiment. His status read, missing in action. The date was April 6, 1865. That single line posed a staggering question. Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered 3 days later, on April 9th. If Donovan disappeared on April 6th, how could he be alive in a photograph dated April 9th, standing at Appomattox beside the president himself? The contradiction was impossible to ignore. Either the records were false or history itself was incomplete. Claire's family had carried rumors of a vanished ancestor, but never details. Now, here he was, placed in one of the most important moments of the Civil War, only to be erased from memory. Someone had wanted his presence hidden. Her suspicion grew stronger when she remembered an old letter her grandfather once kept, a fragile note that quoted William Donovan himself. The words had been clear: if you ever find the photograph with the chair, burn it. It was never meant to be kept. Why would a man tell his descendants to destroy an image that linked him to Abraham Lincoln? If Donovan was truly missing in battle, why fear a simple photograph? Unless, of course, the image carried more than a memory. It carried a secret. The more Claire pieced together, the more the silence around her ancestor looked less like accident and more like design. His absence from official history was not neglect, it was a curtain drawn with purpose. By this stage, the photo was no longer just a puzzle of impossible colors. It was the evidence of a man lost in the shadows of history, standing in a place he was never meant to be seen. If William Donovan had really been erased, then who had the power to erase him, and why? The more Claire studied the photograph, the more the impossible turned personal. What had first seemed like a random soldier lost in the background was now a familiar face that refused to be ignored. The man between Lincoln and Grant was not a stranger pulled from history's shadows. He was her great-great-grandfather, William Donovan. It was a match too strong to dismiss, and the thought made Claire's breath catch. If Donovan appeared beside Lincoln at Appomattox, then the story of her family was bound to the closing days of the Civil War. Still, the mystery did not end with a familiar face. Claire knew that personal recognition was not enough, so she began searching the military archives herself. There, hidden among thousands of names, she found him listed: William Donovan, medic, 104th New York Infantry. His status was marked in stark letters: missing in action, April 6, 1865. The date added another layer of confusion. Confederate General Robert E. Lee had surrendered 3 days later on April 9th. According to the record, Donovan had vanished before one of the most defining moments of American history. Yet the photograph placed him alive and present at Appomattox on that very day. The contradiction was undeniable, a hole in history that no one had filled for more than a century. Claire pressed further, and the story grew darker. Family legends had long suggested that Donovan never returned from the war, leaving his descendants with nothing more than whispers. But a faded letter tucked into her grandfather's possessions carried a warning that now made chilling sense. Written in shaky script, it read, "If you ever find the photograph with the chair, burn it." It was never meant to be kept. His disappearance seemed planned, as though someone had wanted him erased. Claire began to realize that her great-great-grandfather's silence was not an accident of history, but an act of design. If he truly stood with Lincoln and Grant in the moment of surrender, his presence had meaning. He had not wandered into the frame by chance. Someone had placed him there, and someone else had made sure that no record of him survived. What disturbed Claire most was the feeling that the photograph was never meant for public eyes at all. For the first time, she began to wonder if her ancestor had carried responsibilities that went far beyond the role of a medic. Perhaps his disappearance was not about being lost in battle, but about being hidden in plain sight. The more she pieced together, the more one thought pushed to the surface. Donovan was not missing. He had been removed. But what kind of connection could place an unknown medic beside the president during the final act of the war? If William Donovan truly stood beside Abraham Lincoln on the day of surrender, then his presence demanded an explanation. Ordinary soldiers did not vanish from official records only to reappear next to the president at one of the most historic moments of the Civil War. The more Professor George Kramer searched the archives, the more it looked like Donovan's disappearance was not a mistake, but a move ordered at the very top. Late one evening, Kramer uncovered a field memo buried deep in the War Department's files. The line was short, but its meaning was explosive. WD, moved to shadow post per Al's request. Not to be logged. The initials fit Donovan's name, and Al was the private nickname Lincoln's aides sometimes used for him in personal notes. If this document was genuine, it meant that Lincoln himself had reassigned Donovan to a unit that officially did not exist. For Kramer, the memo explained why Donovan's trail ended in the military records. It was never supposed to continue on paper. This discovery suggested something few historians had ever dared to propose. In the final weeks of the war, Lincoln may have created a shadow network, one that operated outside the visible chain of command. It would have been small, selective, and invisible to the public, built on trust rather than rank. Their task was not to fight battles or lead brigades. Instead, they would escort, guard, and observe in silence, reporting only to Lincoln himself. Such a group would have given the president eyes and ears untouched by politics, a way to move and act without interference from generals or cabinet members. The theory gained strength when another piece of evidence surfaced. A preserved field journal referred to temporary escorts assigned for sensitive movement between command zones, selected outside normal rank. These men left no paper trail of promotion or honor, and their names never appeared in the official rosters. They were chosen not for glory, but for discretion. If Donovan was among them, then his silence was not failure. It was his assignment. The most striking proof, however, came not from words, but from fabric. While scanning the original photograph, Elsa, the forensic imaging specialist, noticed something faint on Donovan's uniform. Beneath the fold of his collar, almost hidden, was a small stitched patch with 3 letters, PEC. It stood for Presidential Escort Committee. This group had never been acknowledged in textbooks, but fragments of its existence appeared in diaries and coded notes from Lincoln's inner circle. The evidence suggested that Lincoln, unsure whom to trust in his government, had formed a personal guard chosen outside the official army. The patch changed everything. It showed that Donovan was not simply a medic who wandered into the frame. He had been placed there deliberately, close enough to protect the president, yet silent enough to disappear from history. Even the empty wooden chair in the photograph seemed to take on new meaning. What once looked like a forgotten prop could have been a marker, a space deliberately left open for danger, for decisions, or for men like Donovan to step in when others could not. For Claire, the realization was overwhelming. Her ancestor was not a casualty of war, but part of a network hidden in plain sight. His disappearance from records was not abandonment. It was a shield designed to keep the truth buried. If Lincoln trusted him enough to wear the patch of a secret committee, then Donovan's story was tied directly to the fate of the president himself. The deeper question still remained. If Donovan was part of a secret unit created by Lincoln, then what was the purpose of assigning him to stand at Appomattox? Why would the president place a man outside the record books at the very heart of history? The discovery of the patch on Donovan's uniform had already shaken everyone in the lab, but the real shock came when Elsa adjusted the scanner once more. Her trained eye noticed an extra line of stitching, almost invisible against the dark wool. It was not a repair or decoration, but something deliberate. Slowly, the spectral imaging revealed words faintly sewn beneath the lapel. The message was short, yet terrifying in its clarity. Target verified. Stand until April 14th. The room went silent as the weight of those words sank in. April 14th, 1865 was not just another date on the calendar. It was the night Abraham Lincoln was shot inside Ford's Theater. The message seemed to confirm that someone knew in advance about a threat to the president's life, and Donovan had been ordered to remain on watch until that very evening. This was not routine military language. The phrase "target verified" sounded like an assignment, the kind of coded instruction meant for intelligence work, not battlefield patrol. For Claire, the meaning hit like ice. If her great-great-grandfather was told to stand guard until April 14th, then he had been placed at the center of the most tragic event in American history. Instead of disappearing because of illness or desertion, Donovan had been tied directly to the hours before Lincoln's assassination. His presence was no accident, and his silence afterward no coincidence. He had been part of a line of defense that either failed, was interrupted, or was cut away deliberately. The experts in the room debated what the message implied. Mason, the paper conservator, argued that "target verified" suggested Lincoln himself had been identified as a marked man. Elsa added that "stand until" implied a limited assignment with a clear end date, as if Donovan had been ordered to hold position for a countdown he could not control. The phrasing did not point to chance, but to structure, a plan carried out behind closed doors. If this was true, then Donovan was not only aware of danger, but was living inside the shadow of a conspiracy. The revelation connected disturbingly well with the letter Donovan left behind in his family line. His warning to burn the photograph if ever found now carried a much darker meaning. The picture was not just proof of experimental color photography, it was evidence of prior knowledge about an assassination. To keep it was to hold a secret that men in power had wanted erased. Claire understood then why her ancestor vanished. He had not been forgotten by history. He had been deliberately removed from it. Yet questions refused to stop. Did Donovan try to act and fail, or was he prevented from carrying out his orders? Could he have been silenced before he could intervene? The gap between April 9th, when the photo was taken, and April 14th, when Lincoln was killed, was narrow but crucial. In those days, Donovan's fate had been sealed. The last message sewn into his coat suggested he was close to the heart of the storm, perhaps close enough to see the pieces falling into place. Perhaps Donovan had no chance to intervene. Perhaps orders never reached him in time. Or perhaps, more chilling still, he was removed because his knowledge was too dangerous to leave alive. What was certain was that someone had taken extraordinary steps to cover up his presence and to bury any trace of his assignment. The photograph had now shifted from being an impossible relic to a piece of forensic evidence. It held not only the faces of great men, but also the shadow of a hidden struggle that ended in tragedy. And if a single stitched line could reveal so much, what else might the photo contain about secrets Lincoln never wanted made public? Even after the shocking message hidden in Donovan's lapel, the scientists could not look away from the photograph itself. The colors were too vivid, the details too sharp, and the texture too modern for a picture that supposedly came from 1865. Civil War photography was black and white, taken on fragile plates that captured faces but erased the world of color. Yet here was an image where every shade seemed alive, as if time had been suspended. Elsa, the forensic expert, decided to test it again. She placed the photo under spectral scanners designed to read pigment layers invisible to the human eye. What the machine revealed was beyond expectation. The dyes were not brushed on after development, nor were they the result of later tampering. They were embedded inside the emulsion itself, fused with the silver salts at the very moment the photo was created. This was not artifice, it was an original process. The analysis pointed to organic materials like beetroot and indigo, both common for dyeing fabrics in the 19th century. Yet no record showed them being used in photography at the time. Combined with animal-based binders and exposed in a carefully controlled bath of light, the compounds locked into the paper long enough to preserve full color. The method resembled Kodachrome, but it appeared more than 50 years before Kodachrome was invented. Mason, the conservator, shook his head as he explained that Albaman silver stock was never engineered to hold color at all. By every scientific law of the 1860s, this photograph should have faded into a blur. And yet, it endured. To search for answers, Kramer dug into forgotten writings from photographers of the Civil War era. Among the papers, he found a journal entry dated 1866, written by an assistant of Timothy O'Sullivan, one of the most respected photographers of the war. The note described a request from the president for a single chromatic plate to serve as a legacy image. It mentioned that the development should be private, never displayed, and made only once. The wording fit too perfectly to ignore. Lincoln, known for his concern with legacy and meaning, may have ordered a photograph that captured more than black and white, a visual capsule built to outlast memory. If that was true, then the photograph was not simply a scientific anomaly. It was a deliberate act by Lincoln himself, a decision to leave behind an image that would survive long after letters and sketches had faded. He had chosen to create something for the future, a fragment of truth hidden in plain sight. Donovan's role may not have been only protection, but also guardianship, carrying a photo designed to be a secret until the time was right. The idea raised a final haunting question. If Lincoln really ordered an experiment that broke the limits of 19th century photography, then what other instructions might he have left hidden for the generations to come? Just when Claire believed the photograph had given up all its secrets, another discovery waited in the same album. Hidden in the lining was a fragile envelope its paper yellowed by time yet still intact. There was no address, no seal, no stamp, only a single line written in dark ink, "To William." The letter was brief but carried the weight of command. "My dearest William," it began, "the truth is seldom of interest to those who need it most. You were chosen not to draw your sword, but to stand visible among those who do. Whatever peace we build will test us more than war itself. Stand where they do not expect you. Watch who you must, and if history forgets you, allow it." The voice inside the letter spoke with quiet authority, and its tone matched no one else but Abraham Lincoln. For Claire, the meaning was devastating and yet clarifying. Her ancestor had not been erased because of failure. He had been ordered into silence by the president himself. The command explained why Donovan vanished from records, why his family believed he was missing, and why he had warned future generations to destroy the photograph if it was ever found. His role was not to be remembered. It was to protect, observe, and carry secrets that history was never meant to know. It confirmed the existence of Lincoln's hidden network and proved that Donovan's disappearance was intentional. He had been chosen to bear the burden of invisibility, to disappear so that others could remain unaware of what Lincoln had seen coming. The photograph had shown a man in the shadows, but the letter revealed his true mission. Donovan was more than a medic and more than a soldier. He was a silent guardian placed at Lincoln's side, asked to live without recognition and to carry a secret that could outlast his life. In the end, this incredible discovery proves that history is not always what we read in textbooks. The story of William Donovan, the secret network, and the impossible color photo shows us that some truths are hidden for generations, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. This investigation reminds us that behind every major event, there are untold stories of ordinary people who played extraordinary roles. The positive message here is about the power of curiosity and preservation. Because one person saved an old photo and another asked questions, a forgotten hero finally received recognition. It encourages all of us to look closer at the past, because sometimes the most profound secrets are hidden in plain sight, waiting to change our understanding of the world.